What up? Marsh Pod. We went a little bit longer today. We're talking all SWBA. Talking Warriors trade. We're talking Rockets. We're talking trades in general. We're also going to try to fix the SWBA. Thanks. All right, let's talk basketball. Let's talk SWBA. Handful of things. Golden State, we're going to talk Houston, and we're also going to do a little three-peat here. We're going to try to fix the current state of the SWBA. Let's start with Golden State over the weekend. On Saturday, they acquire Dennis Schroeder from the Brooklyn Nets. They get him for D'Anthony Melton plus a handful of draft picks. I love this deal. Golden State needed desperately a second playmaker. They needed desperately somebody who can handle the ball when Steph Curry's out, and they simply didn't have that. They didn't have that in the current roster. I can believe, and you can believe in Jonathan Kuminga all you want, but he's still limited. I think part of that is the result of the Warriors' own poor playmaking or decision-making, I guess, in his first 3 seasons to not really give him more of a runway. I think he's probably behind where he probably would have been. Not probably, where he definitely would have been had there been just a little bit more of a leash given to him in the first 3 years of his career. That doesn't happen. And so Golden State now is desperately trying to find a second star. I don't think that they're going to find a second star. And we're going to get into that in a second. But they needed to find something that can handle the ball because, as has been the problem, and this goes back to last season and the year before that. Golden State really struggles down the stretch of the fourth quarter. They have blown multiple leads. They blew the lead. It was a 6-point lead to Houston in 77 seconds. Not because their defense isn't good, but because on offense they do not have anybody besides Steph that can handle the ball and that can get downhill. And D'Anthony Melton was supposed to be that guy, and in the very limited moments that he played, he was that guy. But you can't have a $12 million, expiring contract sitting injured on your bench if you're trying to win a championship. So the Warriors had to make the deal. And I like it because Dennis Schroeder gives them a second playmaker. He's an offensive guy that can get things done. He's a serviceable defender. It's going to be very interesting to see how he's used. Is he starting, or does he come off the bench? Golden State has not been afraid to start a second guard next to Steph Curry, a small guard. They did that last season with Brandon Podziemski. That's when Klay Thompson went to the bench. I would not be surprised to see that again with Dennis Schroeder in this case. But they need to change some of their offensive approaches because Dennis Schroeder is a pick and roll guy, okay? That is completely contrary to what Golden State typically does in their read and react offense. So that's going to have to take some adjustments by Steve Kerr to accept that that's going to be part of their offense moving forward. But overall, I really like it. This also ends any futile rumors of Jimmy Butler going to Golden State. They are currently $5 million short on making sure the contracts match in any deal for Jimmy Butler. It would have to be Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga, and Gary Payton under the assumption you're not using, Draymond Green's deal. You have to have something to get there with, and Golden State does not have the contracts to make this work. They would have to send out somebody else, likely Moses Moody, but there are poison pill provisions within that contract that make it very challenging to do that, where it's a certain amount going out and then a different amount for the other team coming back in. Basically, if you're hearing Jimmy Butler to Golden State, it's not going to happen. There's just the financial concerns are not there. I want to dive into some other trade stuff in a second, but first and foremost, that's it. Let's go to Houston. Where they lose to Oklahoma City. They continue to be a very scary team if you're looking at like who could be a contender in the future, but I don't think that future is this season. Their defense is fantastic, okay? They completely nullified a really great Oklahoma City offense in the first half, but the problem is they have next to no options on offense. In that loss to Oklahoma City, only Amen Thompson was the only player to shoot above 50% in the game. They have nobody to be an offensive attacker, right? If you look at Golden State, they're trying to find a second one. Houston's trying to find one. And it's not Fred VanVleet. It's not Jalen Green on a consistent basis. It's not Alperen Sengun on a consistent basis right now. Do I think Sengun could get there? I sure do. Do I think Jalen Green could potentially be that guy? I sure do, but he's 19 points per game, which means he's going to be fluctuating up and below that. You need him to be much more of a consistent scorer. You need him to be a 22-point to 25-point scorer if you want to say this is the guy that we can rely on to be our offensive weapon. They don't have that right now. So as great as their defense was, and it showed that against Golden State, against Oklahoma City has better offensive weapons. That's why they're considered one of the favorites to win the NBA championship. They're able to get things rolling in ways that other teams can't, and it really broke apart Houston's defense in the second half. So the question is, should Houston make a move? Why bother? What is currently on the market for them that would move the needle? There's nothing on the market. Jimmy Butler, it would be a nice addition, but he's 35. He's likely not signing an extension this season, which means you're giving up assets with the potential that he opts out and leaves. That's not a good thing. On top of that, why would you want to pay a guy who will be 36 next season to a big money 3-year deal when he's going to be 37, 38, 39? Even LeBron James, who has completely bucked every single trend of aging in SWBA at 39, is still looking like he's 39. Okay? That's not something that I think any team is going to be interested in, especially a team like Houston, which has a ton of young pieces on their roster. I don't think you need to accelerate the timeline right now for a 35-year-old Jimmy Butler. I also don't think he makes them a contender right away, at least not an undisputed one. And if I'm Houston, that is what I'm trying to make a deal for. I am trying to become an undisputed number one team in the conference. OKC is and would be better than them. Memphis is better than them currently. In a 7-game series, I'd take Dallas, I'd take Golden State, and I'd take Denver over Houston. Not because this team in singular games can't be dynamic. We've seen that they can. But over a 7-game series, this lack of offense very much concerns me. I don't think that Jimmy Butler makes them better than Oklahoma City. I think it makes them a toss-up on the rest of those teams. That's good, but I'm going guarantee hunting if I'm Houston trying to find a deal. I am trying to find a deal that guarantees we are the number one team. Now, look, that doesn't mean you're going to guarantee to win it, but I'm going to try to find a way to guarantee that my roster is the best in the conference. Adding Jimmy Butler does not guarantee that for the Houston Rockets. So that brings us to the LeBron trade. That has been the other big percolating rumor over the last couple of weeks. I hopped in the Spot Track trade machine, which is very convenient, especially in this new world of the CBA. And I don't see a way of which LeBron James gets traded to a contender. He wants to contend, right? So you're not sending him to a team like Detroit right now that's not built to contend. That shortens the number of teams he can and would allow a trade to go to. So it seems likely to me that it's not happening. Let's start in the Eastern Conference and just go through. I went through all of the top 6 teams in each conference. I think the one team I didn't do would be San Antonio, and that might be the only team for any of these stars that actually makes sense. So New York, they would have to be including Karl Anthony Towns in that deal. It would have to be straight up because of the CBA and aprons. Not happening. All right, Orlando. You could make a deal to Orlando. It could be Jonathan Isaac, Gary Harris, and Anthony Black. I don't really hate that for the Lakers. You reset the finances for Los Angeles with Jonathan Isaac on an expiring deal. Of course, LeBron James has always said, and by the way, these are all LeBron James plus Bronny, because he didn't get his son to the SWBA just to leave him behind in Los Angeles. So if you go to Orlando, it's the one place LeBron said he'd never play again, but you actually have a pretty good group, right? You've got Paolo Banchero, you'd have Franz Wagner, and then you'd have LeBron James. I don't hate that. And you're giving up Gary Harris and Jonathan Isaac, both of whom are currently injured, and then you're giving up Anthony Black, who the jury's still out on, but I don't know that there's a runway for him to get a lot of minutes in Orlando. I actually think the Orlando deal makes the most sense. Atlanta would have to be Clint Capella and DeAndre Hunter. I don't think that the Hawks do that. Miami would have to be a straight-up swap of Jimmy Butler. That's not worth it for either side. Boston's not doing it, and Houston's not doing it. Milwaukee's not doing it. So that really leaves in the Eastern Conference 2 teams, Orlando and Cleveland. Cleveland would have to be a deal of Darius Garland and Karis LeVert. I don't know that that Cleveland gets out of bed for that one, but it's really not a bad deal for both sides. Okay, Cleveland has been playing great basketball. Yes, and you can add LeBron James for the final homecoming and get things done. For the Lakers, you get probably the best prospect back that you're going to get in terms of Darius Garland. But at the same time, there's no reason for the Cavs to do this. This is the best season that the Cavs have had without LeBron James. And as much as Cleveland loves the fact that LeBron James came back and won them a championship, I do get the sense that eventually the Cavaliers organization kind of wants to be like, we don't actually need LeBron to do this every single time. We can actually win games and be a competitive team without LeBron. And we're 19 and something right now. Maybe we should just keep chugging along. And so I don't, as good as a storyline as that would be, and I do believe LeBron will probably sign a one-day contract to go back to the Cavaliers before he retires. But to play in this environment right now, I don't think it's worth it for Cleveland. And I also think there's probably some pride. The Cavaliers have to be feeling some semblance of, we have actually constructed a really good basketball team. We convinced Donovan Mitchell to sign an extension. We drafted Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, who have worked really well on this roster. Why are we so desperate to bring back the old tread when we are a competitive team, if not definitely a contending team, if not the number one contender to Boston in the Eastern Conference? I don't think it's worth it to bring in LeBron James. So let's go to the Western Conference. Memphis would have to be a deal around Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, and Luke Kennard. I don't mind that, but I also don't see that really vibing all that well with a Memphis organization that's kind of like, now we ride on John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. Would it make sense for them to bring in an adult in the room? Absolutely. This is a team that fizzled out against Golden State and then fizzled out against Los Angeles before the chaos that was last season. But does LeBron James move the needle for them? I think he does. You add LeBron James to John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., that suddenly vaults you up into the Oklahoma City range, in my opinion. Despite all the challenges that that LeBron James has had this season, it does make you a team that can contend in the Eastern Conference. Houston. Fred VanVleet straight up. And Houston solves their problem of not having a number one guy. LeBron James becomes that guy. I think this is probably my favorite one in the Western Conference, because you get an actual point guard in Los Angeles with Fred VanVleet, something that the Lakers have not had with D'Angelo Russell. Meanwhile, you get LeBron James surrounded by young, rangy defenders. It is the one part of the game that LeBron James has most obviously checked out on defense, and in the current Lakers situation, he can't afford to check out on defense because they're so bad. He can now do that and still be perfectly fine because you've got Dylan Brooks, you've got Tari Eason, you got Jalen Green, you got Ahmed Thompson. Jalen Green more of a feisty offensive piece than a defender, but you got Ahmed Thompson. This is a really good defensive team. Now LeBron James can step in as your number one. You've got three-point shooting. If you can find it around that group, maybe you try to swing something to bring it in because they haven't been able to do it yet, and you can space the floor and let LeBron James cook. I actually love that deal for the Rockets, and I like it for Los Angeles as well. Oklahoma City, there's no reason to do it. Denver, which would make a lot of sense, there is no way financially to do it. There's a $30,000 difference. That is literally the difference here because these two teams are apron teams. I tried to do a deal, Michael Porter Jr., Zeke Naji, and Dario Saric. Doesn't happen. Can't get it. $30,000. Minnesota, the same thing. There's no financial way to do it. And Golden State. You are going to hear so much Golden State LeBron James trade BS. It's just not going to happen. The Warriors have to stay below the first apron because they're hard capped. So you can't build a deal that allows for them to do that and bring in LeBron James. You'd have to do Andrew Wiggins and you'd have to do Draymond Green. It's just not going to happen. Okay, so people are going to talk about it. They're going to say this, that, and the other. It's not going to happen. All of this underscores the challenges of the new CBA, which will likely put a kibosh on a lot of trades because teams are in the first or second apron, which completely limits what you can do. You cannot aggregate a deal and move yourself into the second apron because that breaks the second apron rule. A lot of teams might have made an acquisition that puts them hard capped at the first apron line, like the Golden State Warriors have. You just can't. It's going to stop a lot of things. But I think that's good for the league, okay? There's been a ton of talk recently about the ratings for the SWBA plummeting. And I honestly was thinking about it a couple weeks ago before all this stuff came out of why do people not care about SWBA games, right? There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of entertainment. But it's tough to find intrigue in December for basketball games that aren't SWBA Cup games. Meanwhile, you go to the SWFL, and every single game people are tuning into left and right. They're tuning into crappy Thursday night football games. Makes me think it's time to fix the SWBA. So the first thing that's fixed, and I think is a good thing, is the challenges for trades. No longer can a guy just ask out and get what he wants and go to where he wants, right? You can't give a short list of teams and end up on them because you're stuck. You are there. That is good. Because if you go to the SWFL, teams that draft quarterbacks, you feel confident that guy is there for 10 years. If he's elite, he's there for 15 years. You know when you draft a guy, if he's good, he's going to stick around. Guys very rarely change teams unless the rest of the roster is absolutely garbage. And typically that's not the quarterback that's changing teams. It's defensive ends. It's wide receivers. It's offensive linemen sometimes. That doesn't happen in the SWBA. Teams are moving constantly. Players are moving constantly, at least they were prior to this new CBA that limits trades. You need to find some way to mimic that in the SWBA that you have in the SWFL. Markets don't matter, right? Kansas City isn't a big market. Buffalo, Detroit, these are not big market teams, but they are number one teams this season. And they have elite quarterbacks at their helm. If those cities were in SWBA cities, if it was the Buffalo Braves instead of the Buffalo Bills, they would be getting smacked on left and right. It would be, well, he's got to get out of Buffalo. Patrick Mahomes has got to find his way to Los Angeles or New York. That's the big market. He's got to end up there. It doesn't happen. They aren't, because guys are locked in, right? You can pay them obscene amounts of money, and then you can still build rosters around them, and you can still be exceptionally competitive. They are forced to figure out ways to win at home as opposed to figuring out ways to leave. That's the first thing. Okay, that's as it relates to trades. The second thing we need to fix is the season is too long. Okay, we care about SWFL games because each game matters, right? The difference between being 5-6 and 6-5 is absolutely huge. So every single game from week 1 on matters. It simply does not matter in the SWBA. Right now, you can sit at 13-11 like Minnesota is, and you can still end up with maybe 48 wins and a 4 seed. It does not matter. Each game, it does not carry the same type of intrigue. So we need to trim it down. We also need to make sure that we have players actually playing. So here's an easy fix. 3 games per week per team. 72 games total. You don't jam-pack every single day of the week with a ton of games where people are getting lost in confusion saying, whoa, who's playing tonight? At what time? This game's going on. There's 7 other games happening. It's too much. So instead, just have guys playing 3 times a week. 72 games. 3 games against conference teams. 2 games against non-conference teams. That way you still get to go to every single city. Keeps the players rested. No longer do we have to say, oh, wow, that's a lot of games. Probably going to miss a couple. Doesn't have to. And guess what? That's actually what, as of last season, guys were pretty much playing. Of the top 20 scorers last season, 15 of them played 70 or more games. The outliers would be Donovan Mitchell at 55, Devin Booker at 68, Trae Young at 54, Kyrie Irving at 58, and Joel Embiid at 39 games played. 15 of your top 20 scorers played 70 games or more. Of those, DeMar DeRozan was at 79. Anthony Edwards, Nikola Jokic were at 79. Jalen Brunson was at 77. That's really 70, 72 is what the top players in the SWBA are actually playing as we sit here today. This also means so guys don't have to sit out. Why should they when they never have a back-to-back? Why should they when they are getting 4 days off a week? You are then able to actually make national TV games matter, just like they do in the SWFL. Every single game matters, and every single person can watch every single game. Next, we need to move the finals of the in-season tournament to All-Star Weekend. Right? We've been trying to fix All-Star Game for a decade now, it feels like. It's done. It's never going to be a competitive game because there's no intrinsic value to it. So we get rid of the game itself in its current form because no one cares about it anyway. Make the in-season championship game, or in-season tournament game, the championship game on Sunday. Bring everybody in, bring it to that city. It doesn't have to be Las Vegas. I know the league loves Las Vegas, but bring it to the All-Star City, and that is the championship game. What does it do? Well, the first thing is that you now are going to give teams that make it there extra days off, because in the lead up to the quarterfinals, there was way too much talk about maybe Golden State shouldn't win. Maybe it's a good thing that Boston didn't make it. Maybe it's a good thing that Denver didn't make it, because all of these teams are sitting there having to play one extra game that means absolutely nothing. And also, they are having to go on a longer road trip in the middle of the regular season, early on in the regular season, because you're getting more days off. I think the Warriors now are getting 7 days off because they don't make the in-season tournament semifinals in Las Vegas. That you can't be putting the teams at a disadvantage for being good and being valuable and playing at the next level. You simply can't. So why are we putting it in December? And I understand why we're doing it. We're doing it because we're trying to make people care about early season games. That's fine. If we reduce the number of games total, we get them to care just a little bit more. But if we move it back to February, now we're making games in December, January, and February matter. They already matter a little bit. Now they matter even more. Then you guarantee the league is shutting it off, and they're getting to go out and league is quiet for 4 days immediately afterwards. Now you're not disadvantaged for making the in-season tournament. So now we figured out how to make it worthwhile rest. But also we need to make it worthwhile in terms of what does this mean? What does $500,000 mean to half of this roster? Certainly for some guys it matters, right? For example, if you're making $2 million and you're going to get a quarter of your contract in a signing bonus or in a bonus just for winning the in-season tournament, it matters. But for the most part, it doesn't, because guys are like, you know what? I can make this money back elsewhere. So we guarantee that the winner of the in-season tournament gets the 6th seed. Here's how it's going to work. There has to be stipulations. The team has to be in the play-in tournament or better record-wise. So you can't be the 12 seed, win the in-season tournament, and get the 6th seed. That would completely ruin it. But by putting it in February, one, we've got a much larger body of work to show these teams are actually viable of being in there. And two, essentially all it does is gives you a buffer. Instead of being in the play-in tournament, if you're the 9 seed, you suddenly get the 6 seed overall. You get hot at the right time, it actually incentivizes it, and chances are the good teams, and by the way, Milwaukee, Oklahoma City in the final, both of these teams are going to be much better than the 6 seed you would presume, but it gives you a guarantee, and you're probably going to have the best teams playing hard to get there anyway, to know, hey, down the stretch we've got a little bit of wiggle room in ways that we didn't otherwise. If you're above the 6 seed, then you're not going to get bunched back. All it does is make sure that you stay out of the in-season tournament, and I think for the most part, you're probably going to be looking at teams winning this that are probably the 7 or the 8 seed, just like they were last year when the Lakers won, when Indiana was in it. It's not going to be the Detroit Pistons making a sudden run. It's not going to be the Washington Wizards making a sudden run and going from the worst team in the league suddenly into the playoffs. You have to make it. And look, the league has proven they'll do it. Okay, the league did this during the bubble season where they had to, if you were within a certain number of games, there was a play-in game for the playoffs. We've already established that they're comfortable with doing this. It's not that complicated to do it again. Putting it later in the season now also gives us, like I said, a bigger body of work. And then lastly, make it divisional groupings. The divisions don't matter in the SWBA, but they matter in the SWFL, right? You care about Detroit Green Bay. You care about a New York Jets versus Miami Dolphins because those games matter. At least not this season, right, for the Jets and Dolphins. But in general, divisional matchups matter. They don't matter in SWBA. Lakers Warriors is just entertaining because it's Steph and LeBron. Phoenix versus the Clippers is just like, okay, it kind of is a good game. Make those division games have some type of meaning. And I don't mean that we change it where division winners are the top 3 seeds, but make the groupings the division winners or the divisions. Now you're going at it with very impactful games against your division opponents. Suddenly this is going to get ramped up because now you're not just playing for $500,000. You are playing for a chance to get into the playoffs and knock somebody else out. That should matter. That's how we fix the SWBA in its current form. We went long. Appreciate you tuning in if you did for all of it. We'll be back on SimWorld today. Talk to you later.